Also Help Your Grieving Child by Camelia Murphy. During this presentation, we're going to talk about grief, what happens after the funeral, the process ahead, how you support your child and yourself, support methods and activities you can utilize, a few of my favorite personal coping methods, and some resources. So, what is grief? Webster Dictionary describes grief as a deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement. So essentially, grief is the loss of a loved one, or the loss of an item or a loss of something. Um, People commonly make the mistake to only associate grief with the loss of an actual person, but grief, anytime we have change or anything like that, we often grieve what was, and children really grieve what was. What happens after the funeral? After the funeral is when the grieving process really begins. While the grief process really starts after your loved one becomes deceased, the grieving process really doesn't start until after the funeral. During the funeral time and the days leading up unto the funeral and things like that, usually families are surrounded by friends, people sharing their condolences, and really just being around in your space. After that, the support kind of shifts some. After a few months or even a few weeks, depending on how large the family is, everyone else starts to go on with their everyday life, and then your new normal starts to begin. All of that support that you had in that initial 2 weeks after your incident, it starts to wade off a little bit. Usually about the 3 month point, but it usually starts to go away, and that's when your new norm really starts to begin. So going forward in the process ahead, parents should really focus on and pay attention to the change of emotions that their children will have. Children have the natural grieving emotions of, anger, fear. They may have some outbursts, things of that nature. But it's also really, really important to pay attention to how long that may last. And also really pay attention because children do grieve in spurts. So it doesn't come out all at once. So maybe one day they're just perfectly fine going day to day and everything is all great. And then the next day they just have this big shift and it may last for a few days or a few hours depending on the child. So it's very important for parents to pay attention to that. Also pay attention to the loss of appetite. They're going to go through a loss of appetite, an increased appetite, a lot of those things. They may become very withdrawn, but it's very important for you guys to pay attention to that because that can lead, if they become too withdrawn, it can turn into something bigger than just normal grief. It's very important to also listen to your child going through this process ahead because they're going to, oftentimes children will tell you that they're okay, but their behavior and their body language will tell you something different. So it's very important to listen to not only what they say but how they act. Listen to what they do not say, and then also listen to yourself. Oftentimes, like I said, children will tell you that they feel okay or something like this, but as a parent or as an adult or a caregiver, you may feel that may not be completely accurate, and oftentimes you are correct. So just make sure that you listen to yourself as well as listen to your child, and also make sure that you're listening for understanding, um, to help them with their process. So now that we've gone through the funeral and we've recognized what that process ahead may look like, how do you actually show your support? One of the biggest ways to show your support is to keep a normal routine. Try to keep your day-to-day routine as normal as possible. And that means, keeping up with the school schedule, keeping up with after school activities. Just try to keep that normal going. Not so much as a distraction, but to not create a different change in your child's life. Um, and also, don't rush change. Life is constantly evolving and constantly changing. And sometimes during that grief process, it can appear that too many things are changing too fast for children, even for adults, but for children especially, because they can't wrap their mind around the first thing that has occurred in their life. So don't rush change. Try to do things in intervals if you can help it. Um, Also, allow them to have their grieving process. That process look different for everyone. Some children may become withdrawn. Try to encourage them to stay into their extracurricular activities and spending time with their friends. But also, if they want to be withdrawn, allow them their space to have that. Encourage them to take their time to step back into the things that they once loved, because instant death and grief can really shake people up. And then also embrace their new norm. Kids will act out, and sometimes their phases may come out differently. Like an example would be, you may have a girl, let's say you have a girl that lost, and her sibling was a boy that, she lost, and she's grieving the loss of her brother. You may see her act out and do more boyish things than what she normally was doing, and that's okay. Just try to talk to her and communicate to make sure that she's still in a safe headspace. Oftentimes, things like that, they just kind of take their course, and the child goes back onto their normal routine. But just be prepared for some of those things and support some of those changes, and try to actively keep open a clear line of communication. Some supporting methods and activities that you can utilize to help your youth during their grieving process. The number one thing is listening. Listen to gain understanding and not just to hear. Allow your child a safe space to communicate with you. Don't rush their words. Let them take their time to really talk to you, and always try to be there and available when they need you, especially during the beginning process of their grief. Um, Also, try to control your own emotions. Um, that's usually a good thing for kids to see. If you're having a bad day, it's okay to express that, communicate with them, talk to them, let them know that you are equally having a bad day. That way, they will know and understand that it's okay to acknowledge that today is not good for me. I'm missing whomever my loved person is, that that's no longer here, and let them know that it's okay. A few activities that you can do is journaling. Try to push your child to maybe journal and write down their emotions, to actively express themselves. Scrapbooking is always a good one. You utilizing pictures and your favorite things to create. Um, and music is therapy. Music oftentimes help you cope with a lot of things. So music is always great. Allow your child to play their favorite song on repeat, or maybe think of a way to maybe create a CD with the person's, or a disc with the person's favorite songs on them, that the child can have and embrace and listen to at their free leisure. And stress relief activities. Stress relief activities are really big. Children stress the way adults do. Oftentimes they can let it out, let their energy out. But for the times that they can't, create a stress relief activity, maybe walking, maybe running. For kids that become angry, maybe try to do some martial arts, personal defense, things like that, to help them hone in their emotions and also release them in a positive way. That's a very good way to start helping your child through their grief process. So, as a person that started my grief journey at a younger age, I thought that I would share some of my favorite methods, coping methods, and activities that I utilize. The first ones are reading and journaling. Reading is a really great escape to get you out of your reality. You can get lost in a lot of books, and there's an infinite amount of books to read. And journaling. Journaling is a safe space to write down your emotions, um, even the ones that you are scared to express, but you need to release them. So it allows you a safe space to release them without any judgment, um, and you don't have to allow anyone to read them. Crafts and creativity, painting, sewing, knitting, all these things to just keep your mind occupied. They're a great tool to utilize during your grieving process. I chose the dream catcher as one of those images, as you will see, because that's one of the first tools that one of the first crafts and one of the first tools I learned to utilize on my grief process. The dream catcher is supposed to catch all your bad dreams, and when your grief process first begins, oftentimes your dreams can haunt you. Another personal favorite under the crafts for me is memory boxes, including decorating the box and including some of your person's favorite items. That's a very wholesome way to remember them, and also a worry dial. One of those other stages in grief and processes is worrying. You can tell the dial you're worrying. You sleep on the dial, and when you wake up, your worries should be no more. Those are great activities for children. They're like I said, some of my favorite. Yoga and meditation are also great ways to just relax and release tension and to center yourself. It's a good way to try to hone in on your emotions, and understand your body and recognize. And last but not least, family and friends. Family and friends are always a great support, especially if you have people who share in the emotions that you do with the loss of life. Um, and even if you don't have that support groups, I'm a very big advocate for support groups because support groups allow you to share the space with people who truly understand where you're going. Your conflicted days, your good days, your bad days, when you feel guilty later in life or even in the beginning. Support groups is great to be around like minded people where you can really, really express yourself with no judgment. Throughout your grieving process, you may need some additional help to help yourself or to help your child. I provided some resources that are really great. The National Children Grief Association, that's a national organization specifically geared to help grieving children. Their website has a ton of information to help you or your child through their grieving process. The Crime Victim Center here in St. Louis is another great organization that offers free counseling to families and victims, homicide, survivor, assault victims, and things of that nature. It's free counseling service. I would recommend that to anyone who has experienced a traumatic event, and they do counsel children as young as 10. Also, Provident STL, that's the Life Crisis Services. Also, with grief, sometimes people become suicidal. That's a great line to reach out to if you need immediate assistance. And then the crisis text line, that's a great one as well. They just have counseling, so you really don't have to grieve alone. And it's very important that you recognize that, and your child doesn't have to grieve alone. So please utilize these immediate services if you ever need them. So, in conclusion, I would like to state that grief is not only just a process, but grief is a lifelong process. Um, but it's something that you can really manage. I love the quote that's on the screen by Vicky Harrison. Grief is like the ocean. It comes on waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. With that, I hope that this presentation gives you tools that you can utilize for not only your child but also yourself, so you guys can swim through your process. Thank you.